Today I'll be talking about the Maya, Mesoamerican indigenous people of Guatemala. We'll begin by finding out where they live and what their culture is like, specifically focusing on government and international relations, resources and economics, religion and spiritual beliefs, learning and technology, family, life and society, arts and crafts. Once we finish culture, we'll take a look at the Spanish colonialism, finishing with some insights I've had about the presentation and some parallels we can see from the First Nations people of Canada. I'd like to start by showing you exactly where Guatemala is on the map. The Maya, Mesoamerican indigenous people occupy a territory in the southern Mexico, Guatemala, and northern Belize. We'll be focusing more specifically on Guatemala, the Guatemala portion of these people. Guatemala is situated southeast of Mexico, south of South Belize, and west of Honduras, and El Salvador bordering the Pacific Ocean. The Mayan cities were known to be governed by a monarchy. Their kings and their queens were to come from a royal descent, which was known to be omnipotent or godlike. Each city was governed separately by its own king. Although separate, each nation or kingdom did a great deal of trade amongst themselves and other groups in surrounding areas we now know as Mexico, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. There is even some evidence that suggests that they traveled further afield for trade. Although their trade relations were vast, Mayans never politically or militarily formed larger groups among their diverse tribes. The Mayan economy was a trade-based system with no currency. Trade values would fluctuate in each city, depending on their level of supply and demand. There were two main groups of resources traded: items of prestige and items of substance. Prestige items were things like jade, gold, copper, decorative pottery, and ritual items. Essentially, anything deemed to have a limited practical value. Items of substance are items classified for survival, things like food, clothing, or tools. Mayans relied on agriculture, growing corn, beans, and squash, with corn being a large staple in the diet. The second form of agriculture was raising animals. Mayan people raised a diverse group of animals. Fun fact, it is still very much unknown if the merchants took orders from the wealthy elite for what prestige items to procure, or if they've chose based on free trade society. Trade records are scarce and often lacking as to how the Mayans chose to partake in international trade. Maya religious beliefs are formed on the notion that virtually everything in the world contains ka, or sacredness. Ka is a term to explain the spirituality of inanimate and inanimate things, describe the most divine life force of existence. Maya belief establishes the creation and sanctity of human beings and the earth, and all things sacred. The Mayans of Guatemala were noted to have followed the Pavova Council Book. It contains texts about human creation, myths, and histories. It should be noted that some of the information in this book shows Spanish colonialism in the myths and stories. The Mayan had a number of rituals. Some of these related to human sacrifice, but more common was the ritual of bloodletting. Bloodletting is the cutting to spill of the blood as a practice of sacrifice. In the case of Maya, bloodletting was done amongst the royal lineage and to please the gods and communicate with their ancestors. In the Mayan society, all the common people would educate their child in a profession that they were trained to do. Children would begin their training at 5, and by the time they were 15, they would be fully versed in practices of their parent. This meant there was no changing professions, no matter how poor or skilled you were. If a father was an artist, his son would become one as well, no matter the circumstances. Only on a rare occasion would children with special skills be singled out to become something other than their parents' profession. The upper class, those close to the royal family, would be educated by special priests in the subjects of math, science, astronomy, medicine, and writing. Mayans were quite advanced for their time in pioneering many things we take for granted each day. Some of their more outstanding achievements are understanding the concept of zero years before European societies, having calendars with 365 days and tracking moon cycles thousands of years in advance. Probably most impressively, they've had a written language by 700 BCE with only 4 other societies can boast. The typical Mayan family would have 5 to 7 members. The children would share duties of the parents, which was for the common Maya woman would be cooking and weaving, while the male role was hunting and fishing. They would marry in their late teens through arranged marriages. Arrangements were done among the parents, and oftentimes a dowry was paid to the bride's parents for the cost of raising her. The Mayan society was a 3-class system: upper, lower, and middle. The upper class were nobles due to their occupation, which was something like a high priest or a tribute collector. They lived in central areas of Mayan cities. The middle class were commoners, usually farmers, laborers, or servants. They generally lived on the outskirts of the cities and worked on plots of the land. The lower class were slaves, usually Mayans were failed to pay debts or prisoners of war. The Mayans are known for their beautiful structures, pottery, and sculptures. Much of the influence comes from their religion and from the kings of the cities who wish to be remembered. The pottery that the Mayans made was made without the use of potter's wheel, which is quite astounding. Prior to the Spanish colonialism of the 16th century, Mayan civilization experienced a rapid decline. Historians are unsure of what caused this strong civilization to abandon many of its cities. It is now commonly believed that due to military conflict, political instability, and natural disaster, the civilization failed. By the time Pedro de Alvarado and Spanish colonialism had arrived, the 100 of Mayan cities were reduced to few small towns and 2 strongholds. Colonialism then forever changed the landscape for Mayans and Guatemala. By using disease, military allies, and eventually betrayal, Alvarado was able to destroy all the Mayan cities. Some Mayan rebels were able to escape colonial grasp and fled to the hills of Guatemala. This act helped preserve Mayan culture and beliefs, which is largely evident in how the indigenous people of Guatemala perceived Mayan leaders of its time as a hero and Alvarado as the villain. Growing up, I had always believed my textbooks and society that the Mayan people were savages, and it was a shock to see how sophisticated and powerful they were as a nation, in many regards surpassing other more developed European cultures of the time. It is just like the Western culture to focus on small negatives like how they sacrificed others and how they were outmaneuvered by the Spanish instead of the great things they did, like invent chocolate, pioneer mathematics, build beautiful large cities, and create vast trade network. It is also interesting that most of the research I came across is found by outside groups. None of the sources, as far as I could tell, were people familiar with the culture. This is still often the case for the First Nations of Canada, adding to the misinformation other groups are getting about these people. Both groups found beauty in what the earth offered and attempted to make use of everything. The Mayans found value even in precious metals and stones. Both groups believed that everything in their lives was sacred. They would spiritually connect with all the things around them, implying a greater value to it and instilling a wish to protect and treasure it. Both groups were made up of a multitude of individual tribes or cities sharing common traits like culture and language. They were never united under one banner, militarily or politically, which demonstrates how proud they are as individuals and how being so similar still does not make you the same. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you really enjoyed it. I hope you also gained new insights about the Mayan culture.
Got me all in fresh water. Baby, when you laughing, is it cause you feel an excellent vibe? That was just a fraction of the good love I provide.